I am Wester van Gaal. I'm a journalist at EU Observer. I've been asked to moderate this event. Thank you so much for all being here. I'm assuming everybody knows what Global Gateway is, but there's hundreds of people online joining us. So I'll just sort of do a one-sentence summary, which is that Global Gateway is Europe's 300 billion infrastructure investment scheme. And a lot of the 8 projects are going to be included in that, subsumed by it, however you want to call it. But before we go into the report written by Alex and Farwa about who benefits from Global Gateway, what is it actually? I'll just go to the opening remarks by Evelien van Roemburg, head of Oxfam EU office. Thank you. This is probably better than this one.
Good morning, everyone. What a wonderful turnout to this event on the Global Gateway. 2 years ago, the European Union organized a party in the metaverse for the Global Gateway. I'm really happy to see that the turnout now is much higher and that there's much more interest now for the Global Gateway. And rightly so, because born only less than 3 years ago, in December 2021, the Global Gateway has grown into this main strategy for the EU's development cooperation, or its approach towards development cooperation. And it's great to see that there's so much interest in development cooperation. So welcome to representatives of the European Commission, to representatives of the Parliament, to civil society, to member states, to think tanks, to universities, and also welcome to everyone online, which indeed is quite a big crowd. My name is Evelien van Roemburg. I'm the director of the Oxfam EU office here in Brussels, and welcome also on behalf of our partners Counter Balance and Eurodad. We're really happy to see that development cooperation is not out of fashion yet. And of course, it shouldn't be, because development cooperation plays a key role in reducing global poverty by improving people's lives, by improving access to healthcare, education, and work. It helps to reduce inequalities between and in countries. It supports countries at the front line of the climate crisis by adapting to this new reality. And it helps fragile contexts from sliding back into humanitarian crises. But these are very big words. I know that, but they're not big words for Rhoda Wilson, a 17-year-old girl in Sudan who can now go to school because of the support of development funding. It's not abstract for Bo Posh, a 42-year-old man raising 4 kids in Cambodia, who now has a secure income from small-scale sustainable farming with the support of development funding. These are real people, and they are not alone. Millions of women, men, and girls have a better life now because of development cooperation. So this is something to cherish. And it is in this light that Oxfam, together with Eurodad and Counter Balance, decided to partner up and do an in-depth research of what the Global Gateway really is and how it will be benefiting real people like Rhoda and Bo. And we care so much about this question because the Global Gateway is paid for by the EU's development funding, or also known as the NDICI, Global Europe. And we want to make sure that this budget is reaching people, real people like Rhoda and Bo, and that it will contribute to the primary aim of reducing and eradicating poverty and inequality, that it goes into the hands of communities, of local authorities, of civil society, and local small-scale businesses in partner countries. And this is really necessary because an Oxfam report just recently published highlighted that the world's richest 1% owe more wealth than 95% of all humanity, which is a crazy number, but it shows that inequality is really there and we cannot be complacent. So with the report that we are launching today, Who Profits from the Global Gateway, we hope to contribute positively to this debate on fighting inequality, protecting civic space, protecting human rights, and what the role is of the Global Gateway in it. And I'm really sure that with the people that we have today, with the speakers, we'll be able to do so. And I'm really glad, particularly with the input from Marta Sanchez and Paul Okumu, who both work for civil society, respectively in Latin America and in Africa. Their contribution is not only welcome, it's also crucial, because too often in Brussels, these discussions on development cooperation are done without giving the microphone to those who should be at the forefront of these discussions. I'm also really grateful to have with us today Marlene Holzner, Head of Unit for Local Authorities, Civil Society Organizations and Foundations at DG INPA. Thank you so much for not only speaking today, but also for the very cooperative attitude from you and your team during the drafting of the report. And of course, it's really great to hear from my colleagues at Counter Balance and Eurodad, with whom it was such a pleasure to work on this project. So the report and this event today is not the end of a process, although I know that the writers are really glad that it's over. On the contrary, it's the beginning of a conversation, a crucial conversation between all of us here in this room and beyond, on genuine partnership, on local ownership, on prosperity, on ending poverty and inequality, and ultimately on the future of the EU's role in the world. Good luck today and enjoy.
Thank you, Evelien, for the great opening. So now we can dive into the details and the nitty-gritty of what Global Gateway actually is with the report's authors, Alexandra Gerasimcikova. All right, cool. And Farwa Sial. Alex is from Counter Balance and Farwa is from Eurodad. Please join me. So thank you for writing the report. Thank you for spending so much time trying to understand what it is and getting to also sort of highlight all the cases of where the money actually ended up in. So as Evelien already said, there's much leaning on the success of this program, also for developmental aid in general. One of the things I've heard you said is that its fundamental design flaws are causing harm, potential harm. Could you sort of explain what you mean by that?
Sure. Thank you very much, Wester. And thanks a lot for everyone coming today. It really means a lot to Farwa and I, because we worked on this report for a very long time. We analyzed 40 cases of the Global Gateway project, like the flagship project of the Global Gateway. And indeed, we found that the benefits to European businesses are pretty obvious, but also the European Commission is pretty explicit about that. It's interesting to note that now the Global Gateway is also very much referenced in the Draghi report. So really the prominence of the strategy to support European competitiveness and to capture the market share away from China in the Global South is really high on the agenda of the strategy. So from our development perspective, this is very problematic. And indeed, like the way it's flawed, I would say one can look at the engagement of the Global Gateway with the business sector in two ways. One is this business advisory group, very well known because a lot of civil society organizations criticize this. It's composed of 59 members, European companies, including large ones like Total Energies, Siemens, Volvo, Bayer, and totally excluding companies from the Global South, for that matter. The role of this group is to impact the strategic guidance of the Global Gateway and to have dialogue of basically what kind of investments can happen on the ground. Unfortunately, the meetings of this business advisory group are not public, but again, I don't think we should necessarily overstate the importance of this group. It's also a lot about informal type of lobbying that's going on, like one-on-one meetings that again are not really disclosed. Apparently, I should speak louder, sorry. And what we see, though, as an outcome, what we found out in our report and the research, that at least 7 companies benefit from the Global Gateway project already. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Overall, we looked at the 40 projects, and in 25 of them, at least one European company benefits from the Global Gateway. Again, just the tip of the iceberg, because much more research is needed and projects are still slow to roll out. Most of the countries of the business advisory group, they come from rich Western European countries. Like top 5 are Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Spain. So also marginalizing a lot like Eastern and Central Europe and other countries that might not have so many resources to actually invest and promote this type of strategy. I think the second important aspect of the Global Gateway that tends to be overlooked and that also shows this flaw is the fact that the huge attention goes to the so-called business fora and like business missions, whatever you call it, private sector dialogue. We just saw, for instance, that the Commission also had a service contract for 4 million euros to facilitate private sector dialogue in Central America. I mean, you go figure, like, if this money would be used for actual development purposes and not just for dialogue with a private sector, what kind of impacts that could have. There were at least 25 of these business fora that we also researched in our report that take place. And this shows that it's not just the lobby by the companies, but it's also the catering of, or like the European Commission's attempts to attract the businesses to actually invest in development, which is a whole other level of then trying to mobilize the public sector, the private sector involvement. Maybe just to give an example, one of the beneficiaries from the business advisory group of the project is Total Energies, fossil fuel giant, still very much not aligned with the Paris Agreement. The Global Gateway supported Total in training of youth and vocational training and guidance for youth for for employment opportunities in Cabo Delgado, where Total Energies has big LNG project. You might have seen recently Politico had great investigation into the massacres of civilians that took place by the Mozambican army, which Total Energies supports. And this was, again, not really flagged in any kind of due diligence processes, like on the side of development finance institutions that implement the Global Gateway, nor by the Commission itself. So something we also argue is really that this needs to change. This just goes to show this type of attention to private sector under the Global Gateway and really trying so hard to attract them into investing in development and boost their competitiveness, etc., often goes at the expense of really trying to concentrate on development additionality and on ensuring human rights, environmental, economic standards. Because some of the projects that we researched in the report, they also show that some are already stalling or not really being implemented, or they have been suspended. But these projects also involve investment from the Global South countries. So the issue is that if these projects fail, it's also that burden on the Global South countries, right? Also from our research in the report, we checked, and it's 29 countries out of 37 are heavily indebted poor countries. So these types of projects are really risky and risk exacerbating that burden of these countries that already face huge fiscal issues to actually then be able to invest in development. Maybe I leave it here.
Yeah, just a short follow-up question before I go over to Farwa. Like, if placing benefit at the heart of aid or combining the two in a win-win sort of situation is, of course, very attractive in theory. But just my question is, what do you think are the type of projects that are most at risk if you approach aid through this way?
So something we've generally covered with Eurodad and Counter Balance for a long time is this issue of private sector involvement in the development sector because of the need to invest in public services and public infrastructure. The pure fact is that a lot of the public services and infrastructure that are needed are not going to be profitable. Very much including renewable energy. This is also something very much like high on the agenda in the EU. This is not exclusive problem of the Global South, where it's even more difficult, but it's something that the EU is also struggling itself. The fact that some of these projects are just not going to bring profits, and we need more and more public sector investments. So this is where we see an issue. If there are asset managers like Meridian, which is another member of the business advisory group, which invests, for example, in Senegal into a wastewater treatment plant. If these types of projects stall, like it does, it's the public services also that are impacted. It's also the municipalities, the cities, the public sector that is involved that then bear the cost of these types of projects and have less capacity to invest in public services.
It's interesting that you say it's not just a problem in the global south, although we're speaking, of course, about global gateway. You know, water management in the UK also got taken over by asset managers, and that didn't go very well. So one of the other criticisms raised by you and also by others is the lack of transparency, and also the lack of access to the stream of funds, the privatization of funds. Could you say a few words about that, Farwa?
Is it okay now?
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for coming, and thanks a lot to all my teammates and everybody who was involved. Let me start by saying that this is the second report that Counter Balance and Eurodad have published on the issue, and we've been following it from the very beginning. And it's a bit of an illusion to think that there were two authors involved writing the report, because over 20 people were involved in simply fact-checking, looking at the analysis all over the world, and a huge effort went into verifying the facts because of transparency issue, you know. So when we think about the global gateway, it's almost like a black box where you have a lot of branding. Everything is now almost branded global gateway as the EU's offer to the global south, and in a way, our main message is that it is redirection of development aid. So traditionally, as we know, development assistance was for very specific purposes. It was mainly grants. And the idea was that it should not occur in a transfer or a reaping of profits from those who were in need of grants. And over the years, we have seen a deterioration of this concept. But I think with the Global Gateway really takes it to a new level, because not only is there a diversion of aid or a misdirection of aid, as Alex just detailed in very, very specific corporate cases, company cases, but also there is a huge transparency problems. So for example, there are 225 projects. As you already said, we were analyzing 40. Out of 40, 25 are with a clear benefit to one European company. However, finding this information and looking at financial intermediaries, looking at the different routes that the investment has taken was very, very difficult. And our experience of verifying this information was also extremely difficult. And this actually made the reports publishing very long, right? Because we wanted to make sure. However, we now have these numbers, and I encourage you to look at the report in detail. And when it comes to transparency, I think one of the biggest sort of ambiguity which is created in the Global Gateway is, well, what is public and what is private? So thanks to a lot of our CSO partners who've already done a lot of research on projects in health and also in digital, we observed that in many cases it was not very clear about who's benefiting from the money, which is actually EU taxpayers' money. So, for example, BioNTech, which is a mega giant pharmaceutical company, is part of vaccine production, and one of the projects is being advertised as being a global gateway project. However, it's not very clear if the money is actually coming from the commission or BioNTech is an investor. And if you remember, not very long ago, we were in a huge pandemic where one of the major problems was that a lot of pharmaceutical companies were reaping the benefits of COVID vaccine production. We had IP issues. I mean, it was a period of extreme devastation. And if we're saying that this global gateway model, which is dominated by private sector interests, is the way forward, I mean, the future is pretty bleak. So these are some transparency concerns that are very obvious. But also, I would say that when it comes to procurement, when it comes to contracts, it's not very clear who's getting the contract, what is the procurement procedure. And when we were in conversations about how to get this exact information, one of the responses that we always got, well, it's all online, right? And a lot of online information is actually fact-checking, it's tick boxing exercises, and you don't really go to the fact of the matter, which is that who's bidding, who's winning the contract, how does the procedure happen, and why are so many domestic companies involved? You know, if on another from another perspective, we also think about things like you know, the sort of this rush for minerals or the rush for raw materials. I think we see a similar kind of push for getting projects in regions which are very, very sensitive to conflict. So, for example, the project which involves the EU-Rwanda deal is taking place in a region which is really, really harmful to Congo. So if we're talking about a lot of contracts being rolled in very conflict regions, then, you know, when we have this whole story of blood diamonds, then what kind of human rights, what kind of investments are we really talking about? Thanks.
I'm interested in if you could specify what the obstacles are if one would want to have like information about these sort of public-private partnerships, right? Like what are the kind of things that makes it so difficult for you or for local CSOs to actually, civil society organizations, to get access to that information?
Yeah, I mean, so beyond what I've mentioned in terms of like basic access, emails, questioning, there are several cases where organizations have put in, so for example, Counter Balance has put in a freedom of information request for a couple of projects, and actually that information is not available. And we do know that with freedom of information requests, it can take months and even years sometimes. And at that, and by that point, really, you know, there's no need for that information because a lot of these projects come out. And in that context, I would say that the political leak is very important, because when we say that, you know, there are transparency issues and then suddenly something really comes out in the open, in a way, this is a complete, you know, a hijacking of public interest, because the information is being leaked. You know, this information, A, should be public, A, should be subject to consultations with civil society and especially global South civil society. There shouldn't be leaks for us to understand where we are at the moment.
So I'm assuming, for example, that a lot of the public enterprises involved are a little bit more open in theory to provide information. So what are the, you just said like the inclusion of CSOs in the process is a box ticking enterprise, right? So what do you mean by that? Like, and how could we improve it?
Yeah, thanks. I think, Vester, this is a very important question and a sort of touchy one, because the Civil Society Platform Forum is sort of adjacent to the Business Advisory Group. And actually, Eurodad was one of the first organizations which was part of the group, and we're no longer part of the group at the moment. And, you know, this is owing to a lot of delayed information and so on. But the point here is that the civil society group, which has been formed, is not actually equal to the business advisory group, and maybe not even doing the job the civil society is doing outside the civil society platform. And the reasons for that is that they are not part of design of the project, the design of the project, but also how the project is progressing. So I think there is a lot of discontentment within this group, and we will hear more from our partner Paul here, who will shed more light on it. But you know, you can have a lot of sort of ad hoc processes or systems and say that these systems are actually working. But for systems to work, you have to have results, you have to have consensus, and then you have to show how they are actually reforming or improving the project. From where we see at the moment, I mean, there is no room for civil society to actually play the role of civil society in this platform.
Thanks a lot. On your other question with regard to like whether public enterprises are a bit better or so, maybe just to like highlight how the Global Gateway works in terms of financing, right? Because this is also then the matter of accountability and responsibility. So for example, it's development finance institutions like the European Investment Bank that actually implement these types of projects. We had Bangladeshi civil society organizations reach out to us with their concern about renewable energy projects that the EIB concluded in an agreement with the Bangladeshi government, that they're really unsure how the money is going to be spent and who will be the final beneficiaries. From our 10+ year experience of Counterbalance, whenever we actually ask for this type of information, the bank loves to respond, but this is private sector secret, we cannot disclose this kind of information, who are the actual beneficiaries. So a lot of the times we just do not know who are the final beneficiaries, either of the direct loans of development finance institutions like the EIB, but also other national ones, or it's this type of chain of tendering, like what we also cover a lot in depth in the report. And again, we just scratch the surface, right? Is that it's one company that can be awarded the contract and then subcontracts to European entities. So even if it's, for instance, a public entity in the global south, then somehow it still ends up with the European company.
Yeah, if you dig deep enough, then what you're saying, you end up at a company who doesn't want to share its business details. And well, not knowing where the money will go, obviously will have repercussions for how popular the project is on the ground itself. So maybe we can just now start shift to the panel. I'd like to invite my esteemed panelists to the stage and join us. And so our new panelists are Marlene Holzner. She's here. She's head of unit of EU Commission Department of International Partnerships. Paul Okumu, please. Yeah, I think we have to share the. Do we have everybody? Okay, right. Okay. Marta Sanchez, program director of, you're going to give us the perspective from Latin America. And Paul Okumu, you're going to give us the perspective from the ground and also in Africa, not the entire continent, please. So, but just I'd like to give the Commission DG Marlene Holzner the first sort of opportunity to respond to some of the criticisms raised. Lack of transparency, the CSOs being a box-ticking enterprise. What are your first thoughts on what you just heard?
I'm not used to microphone, sorry. No, I have to say first that I'm really happy that we can have a public discussion today and that it's not in a room, but everybody can see, can hear, can contribute. And I'm very happy that, we can discuss some of the ideas and the criticism that you have made, because I think that at the end of the day, we can all learn. And that's what, I'm also standing for. I'm in charge of exactly what was said before, the relationship with civil society and consultations. And as you know, the report has 140 pages. I don't know if you have read it already. So it's a little bit difficult for me to come back to all what is in there. So I thought, just for the sake of clarity, I will give you 3 points. And then if you allow me to, even if I'm from the European Commission, to have a little provocative question. Okay?
These two.
Okay. The first one is that I think we all share the same analysis. There are too many poor out in the world, and we have to help them. And you can look at the different indicators, whatever, but we have poor countries out there. And one of the indicators is, those who work in this field for a long time, as me, 15 years, there is the concept of least development countries. And out of 50 something that we had in 71, when they started to do that, 7 out of 50 something, they have improved. So the situation is disastrous. Now, the big question is how to respond to that. And I think there it comes where maybe you, NGOs, Oxfam, Eurodad, Concord, I see Tanya Cox sitting there, have a different analysis how to reduce the poverty in the world. And what the European Union, not the Commission, but the European Union plus the member states, Italy, France, Germany, you name it, okay, have said, okay, if we have not achieved to reduce the poverty in the past, let's say 50 years or more, with a very traditional, I give you a grant, I give you as a present, you don't have to pay it back, and we build together a school or a hospital, that this did not work, in our view, we should change. So the Global Gateway is conceived as a paradigm shift. And we do it on the basis that we have learned. We looked at the very few examples where not 1 or 5 people went to school, or you can say that 10 have been in hospital and they saved. No, we looked at where a whole country got out of the poverty. And the recipe, it seems, is a rather simple one. These countries have made huge investments in infrastructure. They do the manufacturing itself. So the example was raw material getting out. No, they have to process the raw materials. Third, and that you would like to hear, they have invested heavily in education skills. The fourth point is, at some point, they have sold the goods they have processed with added value also to other countries. And that you will also like to hear from our side, it was never named that we want with any reform or any investment that a few get rich. This model is only successful if we have sustainable, that means high environmental standards, whatever, and equally an inclusive economy. That means that everybody can enjoy that. And Global Gateway is basically following this concept. That's what we're doing now. That is my very first point. Having said that, I believe in it that we do it in a very intelligent way. Because their example was with BioNTech, so I can use that one. Because it's a good example, I think. BioNTech is a private company, okay? We know that Africa, during COVID, has not had the vaccines for many reasons. We tried to do our share, but they did not have as many vaccines. So we said, okay, let's learn from that. And for another kind of crisis that may come up, we would help in Africa, the countries, to produce their own vaccinations. Biotech or BioNTech is with its own private money investing in a company which is Rwanda. So no Global Gateway money goes in there. But now comes the beauty of Global Gateway. The beauty of Global Gateway is that we ask ourselves what is needed that the vaccination is actually really there for the poor people. Because if nobody controls it in Rwanda, what is the quality of that? So what we did with the ODA money, with Team Europe, with the public money, we reinforce an authority, a medicine authority who will control that whatever will be sold there has the same standard as in Europe. And the second thing we do is we invest in the skills because we want the people from Rwanda to have the good jobs in this company, not the Germans or the Italians going there. So there we invest in university, the new master courses, biotechnology, so the people there in Rwanda can have the high and the decent skills and the jobs that we want to have them. And from that always also, have a kind of economic development behind. That's the first investment point, my first message. The second message is we still do what is really close to your heart, human development, meaning we spend money where it has a direct impact on the health, on the education of the people. 2 out of 5 priorities of the Global Gateway are health and education. And we have plenty of flagships which are specifically on that. Now, you might think, okay, Marlene comes here and tells us the nice thing. But the beauty is, even if you criticize us, that's good, because then we are under pressure to do even better. There are figures out there which are published and you can check it. And I please ask you really to check them. One of the promises we did make is that at least 20%, so 1/5. So I take, if it's, this is the room, so I take what? The first row, you know, if that would be the money we all have, like every single cent that it's spent, human development. And guess where we are? Last year, we are more than 40. So if you take the rows, almost half of it. So we have made a promise. You can check it. The European Parliament can check it. The citizen can check it. And we have doubled that, what we promised last year. And sorry to say that because I'm also a little bit nasty. I was a journalist for 15 years. I have here Oxfam, who is actually getting money from the European Commission to do precisely what the colleague she has said. I'm also responsible for a huge project where we want to push and help civic space, you know, getting better. 50 million, and who got the contract? Oxfam. So this is just an example that there is still a lot of money there for what you are really concerned of, okay? And the same is Eurodad, whereas Eurodad is here. We have also a huge contract with you, where you, for us, do projects on inequality. So there's still money there, okay? Now I come to the third point, and then the provocative question. I hope you're all very following me. The third one is that, but it's also provocative a little bit, because I have to, otherwise it will be boring, right? The third one is that the report is hinting a little bit, it's the European Commission coming out with that. And my point is, no. The whole kind of making it, I think, can be successful is that we do it together. Those who have been here for many years as me, remember all this aid effectiveness debate and donor coordination, because I don't know if you know, but I have my budget, we have our budget. Germany doesn't development politics, the Netherlands, Italy, France, Britain, whatever. And we all agree that if everybody does its own bit, it does not really helpful, okay? So for years, we have said donor coordination, joint implementation, you name it. It did not work. And now we're doing it for the very first time. What is called now, it's a new name, but it's the same thing. Team Europe. They all put money in the same pot. They all work together. And we also do it with you. And that's why I'm here. And I have to say that in 2 days, I have my own huge party, which means that we have 1.5 days where this Global Gateway Civil Society platform that you have heavily criticized will meet for the second time. And I'm glad to say that Oxfam is there. He's a member of it. And not you, but your friend is there. And also Eurodad is that you will be there present, I have heard. You're not, but Eurodad is part of the Policy Forum for Development, which is a consultation forum I'm also responsible for, where for 10 years now, 10 years, 1-0. And Tanya knows it because Tanya Cox from Concord, she's the chairperson, one of the chairperson of the Policy Forum for Development. We do precisely that. And I'm happy and I would be very glad if your organization, when we meet together with the commissioner, with Kuhn, that you bring in everything that you said today. Because my goal is to push the button on Friday and to work on these all the things that you have said. Sorry, I forgot. You're also part of it, and you were also invited and be there. You can also not come, unfortunately. Oh, you know, it's not mandatory, okay? I can give the place to somebody else. So we are working on that precisely. And the thing is that in this process group, and that's also the change, I know that for Concord, for many of you, it is a problem that the decision that you can tell us how projects should be will not be done in Brussels. And there's a reason for it. Because these projects are made and designed in over 100 countries. And guess what? I will publish a report on Thursday. You all can read it because it will be on the website, where I can tell you that out of the 100 offices we have in the world, how many have consulted on concrete global gateway project. Now, I don't tell you the number so that you will look at it and then you can say, but we're doing it and it's happening. Design, implementation of these projects, and monitor. Now I come to the final provocative question, okay? I pause here. My personal take of this report is that it's not criticizing the global gateway in certain details, right? My personal take is that you start from a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is that giving grants out, so I give the money, ODA, to a hospital, to a school, that is good. And that if I have banks involved, loans, and the private business bad. And now comes the provocative question. It's also, in my view, based on the assumption that grant is better model. And that's now the big question. If we would be just, I would say, courageous or dedicated enough, and my bosses, the commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, would knock on the doors of Germany, France, Britain, they would give us more money. Because if you spend money via grants, then I have 100, and for 100, I can have a product for 100. If I work with banks, I need maybe 10% of that. So I can do 10 times more, at least, projects. So the provocative question to you is, if you think that grant is better, but you need much more money, do you think that in a present circumstances where Germany cuts next year's development aid, humanitarian aid by 50% because they have to save, France cuts its development aid, we have so many central and also right-wing governments in the world and in Europe, do you think for the next time we go around, for the next MFF, and also with the focus on Ukraine, they want to do defense industry in Europe. Do you really think your model, what you wish for with the grants, that the countries will give us more money in these circumstances so that we can go back to grant system? That is my question. Thank you.
So before going to the other panelists, I want to ask one of you would like to chime into that final question. It's a big one, but
since we cover different things. First of all, thanks a lot for participating today. I understand it's not the easiest position to be in a room with so many civil society organizations who are critical. And on one point, I very much agree. It's not all on the Commission. There is multitude of actors that are involved, multitude of member states involved, as you mentioned, multitude of development finance institutions. Nonetheless, I would say Commission is still very much responsible for the strategic guidance of the Commission, as we also talk about in the report. With regards to grants, that's something Eurodad covered a lot in their work, so maybe this you can cover more in depth yourself, Farwa. But the overall narrative indeed of the development sector is that grants-based aid is the aid that is supposed to go to public services, to public infrastructure, going directly to the poor because it's not generating profit. Putting this aside, even if you decide to work with private sector, because we are not trying to be naive in our report. I think this is like one of the strengths also of the research we've done. But why is the local sector in the Global South completely excluded? Completely. Yes, they do appear in some projects here and there, but from our research, it's majority European companies. Why are companies that are known for human rights violations and environmental damage included not only in the project as beneficiaries, but also in the business advisory group? Like why this type of body cannot exclude companies and check how they engage in development? One more thing to say with regard to private sector involvement and what you say, how the Global Gateway is actually promoting, like manufacturing and industrial partnerships locally. One of our case studies that Farwa worked on is Lobito Corridor, where a lot of local actors that we researched, like their opinions, what they say, what criticism they raise, is that the Lobito Corridor goes through a no man's land. It's far away from any industrial production site, any population centers, yet there are promises to, start creating industry out of nowhere or like invest in agricultural projects, like to again export cheap products to Europe. We don't see in our research, and this is one of the points we're really trying to make, the added value of industrial cooperation. Sure. Gladly, and we asked for meetings with DG INSPA. Yeah, great. And we were also not accepted to be part of the advisory group. I don't know why. Maybe you can tell us. But yes, Farwa, maybe you want to.
Sorry, no, I should not say.
Okay.
No.
Please keep it short if you want to give an answer.
It's what they want.
Yeah, maybe I'll address some of your points. Yeah, again, welcome here and thanks for your very candid responses. I think a little bit of provocation is always nice. I think we get down to the facts and we also have a very direct conversation. So that's great. First of all, let me just talk about this shift to investment and aid has not worked. And therefore, this is the strategy to go forward. I mean, we can just go back in history and look at the Marshall Plan. When Europe was in deep throes of destruction, the Marshall Plan, a grant-based, concessional loan-based plan was what got Europe back on its feet. If we really want to have that offer for the world, I think it's there, the money is out there, and we can do it. So to move from a grant-based, from a development-focused direction towards this model of investment, I mean, this is harking back to a previous era, and we all know what that era is. So from that point, also, there are so many questions about what can we do for these countries which are flailing, children, they're helpless. We have to help them in a certain fashion. I mean, if we're talking investment, then we have to talk about the quality of investment and we have to see the results both in the public and the private sector. At the moment, as we detail in the report, we don't see any long-term structural transformation happening with these projects, So that is one. And by the way, on the biotech thing, when we talk about industrial strategy manufacturing, I mean, the Global Gateway's answers was to send some containers to the country for manufacturing of vaccines. I mean, containers are not really part of any industrial strategy or manufacturing. So I encourage you to please read that case because one of our partner CSOs actually worked on that case. Finally, in terms of giving money to civil society, whether it be Oxfam, whether it be Eurodad, Oxfam, Eurodad, Counter Balance, all these organizations are in part of civil society. as part of civil society, we are recipients of public money, and we show how that public money is used. And you are welcome to look at all of the projects which are being done, and they're very, very purposely making, collecting evidence, doing the job that we're doing. So in a way, we're recipients of public money, which is taxpayers' money, and I think this is a very effective use of that money. So it's not it's not some kind of donation, let's just say. So on that front, I think we have to talk about, when we talk about the Global Gateway, the criticism of A, B, C that we've put forward is out there. Moving forward, I think the human rights sphere, the public aid sphere, the infrastructure sphere, all have to work for development. At the moment, they're not. And I think that puts the question back. A, what is the vision of the Global Gateway? And B, where will it move? How will it move forward in the long run? Thanks.
So I guess a part of that is looking back and whether the funding that Global Gateway generates, the results are good. We'll see. One of the questions or one of the points raised, which is interesting, is that there's a lack of public funding, right? That's a really big problem. So we need private funding to expand the reach over aid and also combine all the national programs in one big program. So I just wanted to give Martha the opportunity to respond to that, because you have been, in a report you've written on inequality recently, you've been quite critical of the promise of private capital to reach the poorest of the poor. So could you just give us a couple of examples and details about that?
It's working? Yes. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all the feedback and the provocative questions. Like, I do have some, so awesome that we're going that road. Because I'm the Global South, right? So maybe I'm going to talk about from the Global South. Yes, so I'm coming from Nicaragua, but I'm now based in El Salvador. I have family in Costa Rica, so I'm from Central America, basically. And I really like that you use the word critical, because we are really proud in Latin America to be known as a critical and radical, but also a constructive actor in the region when we're talking with private sector, because we have, and we are proud because we have learned from the past. We have learned from, and we are still learning from, indigenous communities, peasant communities, people in Guatemala and Peru that sometimes under the promise of development, they have lost their communities, they have been displaced from their hometowns. So every time, and not only for Global Gateway, I have to say, it's not only for Global Gateway that we raise some questions, it's for everything that's related to the work that we're doing with the communities. And the questions are, who designed the strategy? Who was involved? Who's gonna benefit from it? Do we have the same understanding on Global South, on development? Are we taking lessons from colonialism? So I do have some points around this. So basically what I want to say at the beginning is that we can see the connection between Global Gateway and the realities and the needs of the communities. Of course we do. I cannot deny that communities have been asking for years to new roads, hospital, electricity, I mean, fundamental rights. They have been asking for that for so many years. And I think Global Gateway is a great opportunity. And I want to start from there because actually I think this could be a great opportunity to complement, but not to substitute, but to complement what we're doing with international cooperation funds. And it's very interesting, the question of grants or not grants. And I think we have proved the impact of the grants. We have proved that communities have advanced in their processes, but we need to acknowledge that it's not only the community responsibility to move forward, it's a system around the communities that also have to change. And that's a process that go back and forth. And the other thing is that opportunity that Global Gateway presents to have a space where EU, civil society can get together to work with governments, to have a higher standards in the contracts, in the work with private sector. And I'm really glad to see that, because every time that we read the launch of call for proposals from the European Union, there is a question: how are you going to work with private sector? So this is a demand for so many years that we have to work with them, that we should be working with them. And I have to say firsthand, it's not easy. It's not easy. So I really think this is a great opportunity to have a common space to debate, to find common interests, to move forward with that. But if Global Gateway is infrastructure investment and kind of contradictory, saying also development aid, I'm getting confused now, like is one or the other. But just to start with the question, if Global Gateway just stay being an opportunity for infrastructure, I think we're missing the bigger picture in Latin America. And I really like the first provocative reflection. I don't know if this was the first one, but just to say that like in Latin America, we realize that the bigger issue is not poverty, it's actually inequality. I'm talking about a region where we have Carlos Slim in Mexico, the richest man in the region, living next to 80 million people in extreme poverty. So we're not talking about actually just people not having money or people, well, being just displaced because they want to. We're talking about privilege. We're talking about concentration of power and wealth. And that's why sometimes grants cannot find their final way, because we have to deal with that every time. So if we just stay with the idea of poverty, I think we're missing part of the frame of that picture. And the second one is the provocative question. How is Global Gateway going to operate in a context where countries are moving to a trend of more authoritarian governments? And for me, that's the big question, actually. I'm coming from Nicaragua. You must hear what's going on there, but it's not easy, let me tell you. And if you want to research, you can find about more than 4,000 CSOs being closed in the country because the government doesn't want to have any critical voices there. But I'm coming from other countries that I can share the same. What I'm telling you is that how Global Gateway is going to operate where we have government like this. So in that case, what I want to highlight is that that's why for us it's very important the role of civil society, because they are the ones who are having the hard time to deal with these conditions and trying to influence other actors so we can move forward for systemic change. And regarding the themes of shrinking of civic space, I'm from Oxfam. I know about the funding that we're having, but let me tell you that part of the funding is also to do influencing work. So we are here because of those grants. We are here having this conversation because we're taking the evidence from the communities, and I'm here telling you that it's really hard to be in a government that is not open, that doesn't have access, that doesn't permit access of information. So every time you want to have the conversation, for example, about budget, the answer is it's not available. So how is Global Gateway going to operate in a context like this? Like, for me, it's a bigger question. And just to wrap up, I want to say two things, like, because I think this is a space that I'm concerned about the colonial patterns that I've seen so far. So I really like that we're talking about an equal and inclusive process and initiative, but actually I said at the beginning that I was glad to be here, but I will be happier if we could have this conversation in Spanish back home. And we're not having that. Actually, I'm finding out about Global Gateway because of posts of social media in the region, but not because we are invited into conversation. So I know you're having here, like Europeans, like the big question about Global South and how to be more representative and how to be part of it. So I want to say that we need you also to consider that the Global South needs to have the conversation in the Global South. And I'm really happy to that happen also in Spanish, right? So talking about equal and inclusive, basically my request is that we consider that we need to have that conversation in the other side of the world when we are impacted. And so far it's not happening. And that's for me the invitation I want to bring to the table. And I know my colleague is also in the back. He's gonna be on the meeting with the social civil society platform. I know he's gonna bring these questions, he's gonna bring this answer, but I ask him especially to say, please, let's have the conversation in the South. Please let, and maybe I know I shouldn't be using the word please, actually. It had to happen. I'm not, yeah, you know, colonialism again, right? I'm saying please, but no, what I'm trying to say is that this has to happen out there. The civil society have to be part of it, because if we're not, only the governments are going to make the decisions. And as you know, we are living what we call in Latin America, la cultura del privilegio, the culture of privilege. So some of them are in the meetings making a decision, defining the priorities. So yes, my final ask and maybe question is this one: how can we better engage with civil society and the people in the South with the conditions in the South and the realities we're living in the South?
Thank you for doing my job. That's a great question. So we might return to the question of financing a little bit later, and I'll give the Commission also the chance to respond to some of the points. But I wanted to go over to Paul, because so on the one hand, we're hearing CSO has to be invited from the Global South. We have to go there to, you know, the whole platform has to be made more inclusive. But then I heard you just say you weren't very hyped to go to the platform in the first place on Thursday. So I was wondering if you could explain. I think it's
okay. Unfortunately, I'm already on the list of attendance, so I'll probably be in the meeting. I think, allow me to just say two things. First of all, I'm a little bit jittery just listening to how the conversation has gone on over the last 1 hour or so. Jittery because to somehow it confirms some of the fears that we had. We were very reluctant to join the advisory team because we felt we would be used to legitimize something that we didn't want. And I specifically, as Africa Platform, we made our application 1 hour to the deadline. And the reason why we made it 1 hour to the deadline is that we suddenly realized the conditions that had been set in the terms of reference, a lot of NGOs on the continent would not meet it. And once again, people would be sitting in the kitchen cooking, and we would be outside waiting to be served. No idea what the menu is. It's brought on the table. Please eat. If you don't like, it goes back to you. So because of that, at the last minute, we decided. But listening to the conversations, I can hear some tinge of legitimization coming up. You are in the advisory board, so what can you tell us? Come and say it inside there. I don't need to be in the advisory board for me to defend my continent. I don't need to be. I will fight wherever the battle is. I will defend my people and the continent wherever the battle takes me, whether I am inside the room, outside the room, above the room, under the room, around the room. I will fight. I think it is important for me to mention that because I don't think it is a privilege for me to be on the advisory board, and I don't want it to be so. And if there's a feeling that it is so, I will not show up in the meeting tomorrow. So that's one. And sorry, I'm just being a little bit tough because I feel that sometimes when seated in these spaces with so much comfort and with all the things that you have here, we forget and we talk about provocation, but we are talking about people that are dying on the African continent. We are talking about lives here. We are talking about projects with consequences. Some of the global gateway contracts are going to run for 30, 40 years. So we are not just talking about something ending in 2027. I am here because some of the agreements are going to tie our government for the next 27 years, for the next 30 years. So it completely making a mockery of democracy. Because if I have already signed off your country, like the DRC, where the global gateway, the president was brought here just a month to the elections, signed off an MOU. In theory, it is, MOUs are not binding, so please don't worry about it. That's why it's called an MOU. But I know what happened. I know what went on behind the scenes. And I know that it was signed just a month to the elections. And we know what that means for the next 27 years. Look at the, the letter that was written by the, is it called Daniel Kwega, the Nobel Peace Prize from the DRC? When he was so mad at how the EU could, out of all the 55 countries on Earth or the continent, decide to sign a critical raw materials agreement with Rwanda. Of all the countries on Earth, a country that is the one that is causing the war that we are experiencing in the DRC, the same place where those raw materials are going to come from. Rwanda has got no trace of raw materials, absolutely none. But there's a big contract. And what is this going to mean? It is going to embolden Rwanda. It has already caused enough damage in the region. It now has the door open, flung open, or what to now do it for the next year. This is not my statement. This is the statement of a Nobel Peace Laureate from DRC, who is talking about that. So I feel that it is important that we are a little bit honest in what we're saying. The second thing I want to say, and sorry, I hope I don't take a lot of time. We have glorified grants, even in this room. There is nothing as foolish as giving me 70 billion and taking away 480 billion out of my continent. That mathematics doesn't add up. Even if we leave the 480 billion aside and we look at the 70 billion, please, I would advise you, go to the OECD guidelines on what qualifies as grants. And you'll discover grants is a ripoff. Just go to the OECD guidelines. So we talk about, oh, it's free money. We have been giving Africa free money. No free money. If it was free, we wouldn't have received it for 77 years. No, things would have changed. No. But we know where the benefiters is. That's why it has gone on for 77 years. Nobody gives you something free and it is making no change. And we started it in the 1940s. Then we show up in 2024. Grant has been a problem. So let's now shift to private. If indeed grant was a problem, it wouldn't have taken you 5, 6, 7 decades to have realized it was a problem. That takes me to the second issue. There was a discussion here about the premise of the global gateway. And I think we have misunderstood the hypothesis. Because if you look at the global gateway, and let me now speak about the African continent, it has got absolutely nothing to do with whether grants work or whether it is private sector that works. If you look at it, the process began with the identification of 50 strategic corridors. Out of those 50, it was narrowed down to 11. And those 11, there's one from Cairo, runs all the way to the country where I'm in Mombasa. There's another one that goes out to Angola. So you can, it's on the website. So that, at least for that, we can appreciate the EU. That information is available online. So this is not about grants. It's about identification of strategic corridors. There is one primary constant on all those 11 strategic corridors. It's the pathway of minerals. All the 11 strategic corridors, whether it is coming from my country in Mombasa, going all the way to the DRC, or the one that goes to the Lobito corridor, or the one that goes to South Africa, there is one constant about those strategic corridors. So being told that it is an attempt to balance some grant and whatever, no, we are not being honest with one another. If we talk about private sector, we did a study as part of the World Economic Forum, when the World Economic Forum requested me to find out how to involve the private sector on the continent. And what did we find out? 89% of companies on the African continent are multinationals. So Africa is a multinational continent. It is your companies that are running the continent. So telling me that you are working with our private sector is, to me, working with your companies that happen not to be in Europe. There is absolutely, and I'm telling you this because I had a meeting last month with all the top bankers in the African continent. Not a single one of them has a clue what the global gateway is, and you are in the third year. And then you are talking to me about private sector engagement. The third year, we have got how many years to go? 2025, 2026, 2027, 3 more years. So we are halfway on the global gateway project, and not even a single bank, forget about the other companies, not a single bank on the continent is aware. In fact, we are now working with one of the partners to bring them here. Can you imagine? To bring them here. Because I made a request when I was here in March for us to hold a meeting with the private sector on the African continent. You know what I was told? Oh, we are planning for it. You know, we need some resources to do it. You know, we need to think through it. We are now approaching the end of October in the third year. And I'm being told that there are African private sector that are being involved. The answer is, unfortunately, no. I will conclude with this because sometimes it is good to be specific. I received yesterday, or is it 2 days ago, on my inbox, a presentation which will be made on the digital project in my country. 435 million euros. Nice money. 32 projects, very nicely labeled in terms of the areas. And I'm very glad to hear from the European Commission today that on Thursday, at least for once, they will make the report public of how these projects were arrived at. I am excited and I'm waiting. Please tell me the minute you post it online, please let me know. Even if it's at midnight, I'll wake up. Because the biggest challenge we have had is getting to know the details of where these projects are going, where the money is going. I only got a clue when I now started looking at details of the projects that we saw. So 435 million projects, very nicely digitalization. Actually, there's a very nice language. Human-centered digitalization 2023 in Kenya. Nice language, lovely. It's even been divided into very specific areas, and I will not bore you with that. You can actually find that information. Except the angel, not the devil, because I love angels, comes in the details. Because I have looked at all those projects. To be honest, I don't know where they came from, because 80% of them are already in place. We don't need your money to do those projects. I have looked at some of the policy recommendations which apparently will come out of that project. And some of them are laws that were passed some 5 years back. And I'm just wondering, so where is the 432 million going? It is going to something that is called, I'll get the name, I don't seem to have it here, fiber to the building. There's something called fiber to the building. There's a bit of money going there. Fiber to the building is a project that was implemented by a local company called Safaricom, and it already exists. We don't need your money to have fiber to the building. There is an element about taking last mile connectivity to primary schools in my country. First of all, the bigger problem with that is our primary schools don't have electricity. So I have got no idea why you are taking internet where there is no electricity. Secondly, the last mile which is being done by the government is not being done to primary schools, because primary schools have got a much, much bigger infrastructure problem. They don't need internet now. They've got we still have schools under trees. And then you want to give us laptops and you want to give us connectivity and whatever that. What has been happening in Kenya over the last 10 years is last mile to secondary schools, high schools. If this 432 million was going to last mile in the high school, I probably would have given you a tinge of doubt. But to actually include in your statement that you are taking it under a tree, And you want to take from me internet there? Honestly, my concern with all these global gateway projects is that the only thing that it achieves, and I'll finish with this, it achieves 4 things. And I would want you to research it very, very carefully. 1, it enables Team Europe to handle China in a very, very vicious way. If you look at how the projects are being implemented, they're actually taking on China head on in a very, very heavy way. Number 2, it is strengthening unity within the European countries. Somebody talked about colonialism. We still have the scramble for Africa. Germany still wants to run projects in its former colonies. In my country, the British still control. If you want to actually know which companies run where, just look at who the colonizers are. That's why Finland doesn't have a stake there. That is why the Western Europe doesn't have a stake there, because you guys didn't have colonies. So if you look at where the companies are, what Team Europe has done is that it actually, unless I'll give you an example. If you look at the project that I'm talking about, the digitalization, Germany is putting 49 million, Italy is putting 4 million, Netherlands 134 million, European Investment Bank 7 million, Belgium is 51 million, the EU is 70 million, France is 30 million. If you look at that, what we are simply doing is Berlin 2.0, dividing the continent into various countries and giving them projects. And that you guys have done very well under the Global Gateway. But the other thing that you've also done very well is all the policies that have been passed over the last couple of years seem to all come together. The Critical Raw Materials Act, the Green Deal agenda, the fertilizer agenda, the deforestation. If you look at all the policies you guys have passed, they fit very neatly into the Global Gateway. So you've done extremely well in finding a route that will enable you to accomplish every policy decision that you have passed, including the one that I've been fighting since I came here on Friday, economic partnership agreements, which has totally killed the ability of the continent to have a free continental trade agreement, because you are quickly signing parallel agreements with 16 countries, making it extremely impossible for these countries to now even begin any dialogue on a free continental or whatever trade agreement. So I think from that perspective, you've done well. What else have you done well, which we are not talking about, is that we are not communicating yet that the Global Gateway is actually part of the G7 plus, or the G7 infrastructure agenda. If you go online and you look at the side meetings of the heads of states that was held on the sidelines of the G7, you will see that the Global Gateway was situated within the program on investment in infrastructure, which is part of the G7 agenda. So in a nice way, what the Global Gateway has done to you guys is to give you a grip on the Global South that you probably never had. And I think you guys should be the happiest for it. But for us, honestly, it is a sad moment for the continent. I love the language of how it is being put. It is nice. I love how it is being packaged. I love the provocation. But I have spent the last 1 year looking at every single motivation, not the details of the project, the motivation. And I can assure you, this project is going to bring tears on the continent.
So there's much to pick there and to respond to. Can people hear me? Yeah? Okay. So I would like to give the Commission the chance to respond. Maybe also specifically on the project he mentioned, which digitalization in Kenya, and also maybe just more in general, but the extractive nature of the program and the unequal balance in which these, well, maybe your wording would be different, but these MOUs are being signed. Yeah.
Yeah. You will be surprised to hear that what Paul has said
Sorry, can I just ask you to keep it within 5 minutes? Because
Yes.
Okay. Thank
So what Paul has said, you know, it comes also deep from my heart, because he said something I think very, very important. He said, I'm here and I will battle for your aims here. And that's what he's doing now. This is a public debate and it's necessary. And he said, and I will battle for that also in other rooms. And for me, it's important. And I hope that you do the battle also in these other rooms. Of course, I don't say battle, but I'm happy to hear that, you know, Paul, at the end of the day, he thinks it is a good idea to come tomorrow to my meeting and to discuss the project. And just for this project, I would like to explain to you how it works. It's not that I bring here 50 people who are here Brussels-based. I have looked where all these 50 concord. Then we have the Women for a Better Future, you name it. They have the local constituency and local civil society. And those I have invited. I mean, the others you can listen, Paul, but I have talked with those who are in Kenya working on digital and also part members. And there's the person from the delegation who will all answer your question, because I want you to put the finger in that. And I want you to tell me and us what you think is going wrong. Because if you do it in time, and that's the whole purpose of this platform, that's where I personally stand for, I worked for it for now for 1 year, that you put the finger in this thing and saying there are things that are not gone. And you tell us before we make a big mistake. And this is the part where I really hope that you will help us to do it in a way that is okay. And on the terms of reference, Paul, I have to say that it's not provocative, it's just a fact. I have not done the terms of reference of this group. We have been, the 4 of us, sitting there and doing the terms of references. That is me, the head of unit of Global Gateway, Tanya Cox. You were there, or Itok was there. So we had 2 civil society, 2 people from the commission who said, sorry, at the end, you cannot just shout. You have to make compromises. And I know where the red lines are from the European Commission, and you have told me where your red lines are. So what we came up with the local civil society in the countries, and, you know, we have offices in 100 countries. I'm not speaking Brussels language here. I talk with the local civil society as you come from. I'm not Brussels. I talk to guys, to the local civil society in my meeting from Kazakhstan, okay? And I want to hear from all of them what is going wrong, what we have to look at, so that we live up to everything that we promised. And this is my plea to you. Please, check it all. Check what the promises we made. Paul will check everything he can, because from our point of view, in my job, and what I think would be the worst that is happening is that we say Europe is better than XYZ. I don't say the name. And then in 10 years, you will say it was a lie. So my job is, of course, here to say what our position is, why we did it, and that we mean it well, that we have a good aim, a good purpose, we want to do good. But equally, I see my job is to work with you, that you not only tell me here, but you tell me on the project, and I'm standing as my name, as my person, as I have done in other things, and also their studies, where we have changed. When Tanya Cox comes, when the others come, and I have presentation for my colleagues where they say, this is what civil society has asked us to do. And then a few months later, they come, and this is what we have done on Africa, especially. So I have proven record of being somebody not ticking the box exercise. That's not me, Paul. And everybody in the room who knows me knows that that is correct. So please put the finger in there, help us, and shout, of course. Shout, because the more you shout, the more people will discuss this. And I truly think that at the end of the day, we can achieve something which is good. Over.
Thank you. So we could go on forever. I think what is very interesting here is that the level and the detail of the criticisms are minute, and we'll see if on Thursday, just pointing them out. Yes, it's tomorrow. But the hopes are that it will, move the criticism to a better place. But just for now, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of say a few words on how to improve the process, how we might ensure that it might actually become better or able to handle these local criticisms.
Yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, also let me thank Paul for really bringing a lot of very valuable and very much needed perspectives here in Brussels, which I think we all tend to forget very often. One note, because I feel like this somehow is starting to get personal, like Tanya Cox, Paul, and everything. Like, it's not about that. It's about the system. It's about the way the Global Gateway is structured. But correct me if I'm wrong, because again, we're not really part of the advisory group, the dialogue platform, like it changed names somehow, the civil society group. Is it not the second meeting now that's being held, like ever since the first meeting? So how exactly are the civil society partners from the Global South going to bring up these cases in time? I think a lot of what was discussed really just shows a lot of double standards in the Global Gateway, also on the EU side. Again, it's a pity we don't have colleagues from DG Trade here, member state, the EIB, etc., with whom we also engage in different platforms. DG Trade, for example, is also one of the key actors involved in the Global Gateway. Yet, I don't know, like something we also covered in the report a little bit, is there was a heavily criticized agreement that was concluded between the EU and Chile. The Commission itself published an assessment that this agreement might lead to reduction of jobs in 24 out of 31 sectors, most of them in manufacturing. So indeed, how are we talking about grants or private sector? Like if we also at the same time have these types of like super contradictory policies negotiated by the very actors who are also behind the Global Gateway, pretending it's supposed to be development aid. Like indeed, this is a comprehensive system, I think, that needs to be really changed, done in a much more way of introducing just partnerships, and being really on equal terms. Maybe also like a fun fact, even the Draghi report has a better idea of what the Global Gateway should be. One of the points that Draghi mentions there is industrial partnerships to actually map the supply chain and try to cooperate along the industrial chains for the Global Gateway, which is not really the case at the moment. Again, from our development perspective, we advocate for development projects, for public service provision, etc. But just to say that there is a lot of ways to engage on this file, and the Global Gateway really needs to be reformed to actually mean that it provides just partnerships and not just de-risking European companies and trying to back up the companies in case the European companies fail, right? It's not development.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to, in terms of recommendations, we do have a very detailed list of recommendations. And basically the main message of those recommendations really first is to rethink the vision and the message behind the Global Gateway. And that, I think, that is an exercise that the Commission really needs to undertake with civil society, involving them in the design process and so on. But let me also go back and look at the original proposal of the Global Gateway. Now, one of the promises that the Global Gateway made is around 64 or 84 million jobs for EU citizens. So I think this is a very problematic premise because you're saying that we're offering this development model to external countries based on a win-win strategy, which is also going to bring jobs home. I think that this has to be separated. And then we've talked a lot about poverty reduction in certain countries and so on. And one thing to note here is that countries which have successfully transitioned or are in the process of transitioning to very, very limited levels, of course, we know, are focusing on domestic expansion. So by focusing on domestic expansion, by looking at what's happening within the EU, by building the right infrastructure for the EU, we can talk about EU development, but that has to be separate from what is being offered to Global South countries. I'll just stop here. Thanks.
So I wanted to give people in the room also the opportunity to ask questions. So please raise your hand if, yeah. So I have two here. So please don't forget to state your name.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the lady in the aubergine jacket.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So my name is Jean Saldana from Eurodad. And first of all, I want to thank all the panelists, the two authors of this report. It has been a long project, but it has been carefully drafted and carefully checked. And that's why it took very long. And we are very, very happy that it is now launched today. But I also want to thank the other panelists, our two panelists who've traveled very, very far to come here from Latin America and Africa, as well as Marlene, who is here from DG INPA, who we believe is a very important partner in our development, our global development aspirations that we, as I think all of us in the room, would share. I'd like to respond to the points that you've raised, Marlene. First of all, let me, if you permit me, to use a metaphor to respond to your first point about LDCs and the fact that only 7 LDCs have graduated from that status. Saying that the Global Gateway is a paradigm shift, for me, sounds like we are prescribing cough medicine for a cancer, unfortunately. The reason I say this, we all know that financial flows from the global south, the global north, for many, many decades, have far outweighed the financial flows from, did I say from the south to the north? So that's what I mean. The financial flows from the south to the north far outweigh, far outcount the financial flows, including development money, from the north to the south. Of course, development cooperation, there are many, many issues that need to be addressed around that. But a lot of that has to do with other aspects, which include illicit financial flows and debt. And unfortunately, what Global Gateway is going to be doing is increasing those south-north flows, because it is increasing an already terrible debt crisis that the global south faces. The global south is already spending on an average over 30% of their budgets on debt servicing. In Africa, it goes up to 50% of debt of their budgets that are going to debt servicing.
I'm sorry. We have to move to a question.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's my first point, that unfortunately, this is not the right medicine for the problem that has been diagnosed. I think the second point that I want to make is that if you talk about success stories, a lot of that is about industrial policy, and industrial policy that those countries had planned and had designed for their own interest first. And if you have a European interest coming with an EU Green Deal, I'm sorry, that is not about nationally designed and nationally led industrial policy. Which leads me to the third point. We see the Directorate for International Partnership, which for many, many decades has been the Directorate of Development as a partner. And I can remember many, many years ago being part of very, very strong conversations with the Directorate of Development at that time, talking about illicit financial flows and coming together to challenge the rest of the European Commission to take on the tax and development agenda, which then became an important part of a lot of EU countries' development agendas. And I think that's an example of how civil society is a critical partner for development, for the development project of the EU. Unfortunately, what we are seeing today and seeing in this conversation is unfortunately quite a different dynamic. And I do hope that we can go back to that dynamic where we can partner with DG INPA to be critical partners. And I hope that this project and this report is an example of that critical partnership that we can have with INPA to challenge the rest of Team Europe, to challenge the rest of the Commission, to challenge the rest of the European community, EU member states, to go further in our development aspirations. So I'd like to hear how you see yourself taking forward the recommendations of our report in your conversations with the rest of the Commission. Thank you.
Okay, just I'm going to give one other person a chance to ask a question, and please one or two here in the front. Yeah, the blonde lady. Please, 1 or 2 sentence questions.
Okay. Yeah,
or maybe
can
3.
you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chahaya. I represent Platforma. We are a coalition of 27 local regional authorities active in decentralized development cooperation. We are a member of the Policy Forum for Development, alongside also Concord and many others. And we are also a member of the Global Gateway CSO LA platform. We were not involved directly in the drafting of the terms of reference. That was other colleagues. However, we are very, very active also in the steering group. And so maybe just a quick element of that is that tomorrow marks a moment in which maybe for once we actually get the voice of the Global South in there, and we have an opportunity to discuss the case studies and the flagship projects. Up until this point, it has been a limited conversation because of the lack of transparency, lack of information, lack of also flow of information directly to the Commission itself. And so I want to thank the authors and many of the others who have contributed to this to finally be able to also help us in shedding some light on the functioning of the Global Gateway. It's not by lack of desire of being a part of the conversations, the fact that up until now, the platform itself just hasn't allowed us to work concretely on answering, on providing an added value of our own offer as civil society and local authorities. That's just a comment. My question, however, is related to, we spoke a lot about the role of the EU delegations, especially in identifying and discussing the design of projects, since us in the CSO project cannot. How have you encountered in your research the role of the delegations, and how have you kind of understood that to be within the Global Gateway? This is also an element which we are still quite unclear about, and it's not very, we're not very sure about what kind of consultation happens, not only with civil society and local authorities, we believe it to be quite limited, but also what kind of consultation happens with the partner countries who are directly involved.
Who was that question directed to?
That is directed to the researchers and understanding how what kind of information they've had from the delegations themselves.
Okay, so let's start with the Commission. The first question, please keep. Yeah, I'll pick it up after, but please keep it short.
Yeah, look,
3
if
minutes.
there's one more non-thing, one main message for me today to you is the following. And when I addressed and said Tanya Cox and you that you're tomorrow, is not that I want to have this person. You have a job to do. Tanya Cox has a job to do. You have a job to do. I have a job to do. Why I'm saying this? Because I fully respect your role of having a public debate, and let's call it shouting. It has its purpose. You should do it. And I'm very happy that this report will also be debated in the European Parliament and beyond. And that is good. What I just wanted to tell you also, that's why all these examples is that, yes, you have different opinions and you should have that. And I want you to have that for my personal thing, because I think you can help. But what I equally wanted to show to you is that the organizations are sitting here, those who have done the report, except Counter Balance, they are working with us for 10 years already. It's the same people. I'm talking about the concrete things you want to talk to me. So what I cannot buy completely is that you're there and I'm there. Yes, it is true on the report, we are not in the same analysis and the same policy choices we've made. But I want you to understand that with many of you for more than 10 years, And again, not name, but Oxfam is part of Concord. Concord is a chairperson, is working with us for 10 years. Under my start as a job, before we had never done, we had one conference a year. I have 10 consultation online on concrete things here in Brussels. I have every single office in our 100 country doing consultation. And I know who, what, and we do it according to Concord standards. So we are working already together. And that for me is the important point. Please feed in your criticism in that. Now, what the first question was all about. Of course, debt is a huge problem. And maybe the kind of thinking which is not helpful in that is that Global Gateway is not the only answer, and it will never be the answer to all the problems. We do, with IMF, with all the other big financial institutions out there, discuss all these topics about debt. We don't go in a country where we know there's a program, IMF, that they have already a huge debt. And I come back to Paul and Kenya. In Kenya, indeed, the first idea of my colleagues in the office there was to say, Kenya wants digital infrastructure. So we go in Global Gateway, and Kenya said, no, I don't want to do it. Why do you don't want to do it? Because I'm really heavy indebted. So at this point, can I go there and say, you have to take a loan? No, Kenya doesn't want. I think you don't want to have a loan. And that's why these are the projects that are leftovers. And unfortunately, well, they're called human-centered because it's our grant money to pay, and electricity that is other projects that at least we can pay with ODA the last mile to the schools and to the hospitals. The same is with illicit financial flows. And it's also related to one of the examples you had. It was Rwanda and DRC. One of the things that my colleagues are working on, and they will ask really civil society how to do that, because, I mean, it's a tricky one, how to make sure that we stop these illicit financial flows. So what I'm saying is, please do not make the mistake of thinking that Global Gateway and all the big challenges, because we share really the challenges, and in terms of analysis, the problems, the challenges are there. We are completely online, on the same page. But it's not through this part of Global Gateway that we will, respond to all the challenges. There is left and side and whatever, a lot of things that we do. And I will end with a goodie I have for you. The good is that I was also asked, and there I shouldn't have named the organization because it would be perceived as too personal, to check how much money, we still give to civil society for service delivery. You said that, you are a good beneficiary. But again, I did not say it to name your organization, but just to tell you that there's a lot going on besides infrastructure. So the main message was 50 million for civic space, inequality projects. And the figure, which is really, I'm allowed to tell it to you, it has not been published, it's really fresh off the something. You will not get it, not the European Parliament, I think not even the Commissioner, but I'm allowed to say that. Now it's true, the Commissioner will say it only on Thursday to Paul, but then he can say he has already heard it. So we have counted the money that in this NDK, in the Global Gateway times, let's say, is going to civil society. And not in my small thematic budget line 1.5, but basically the whole lot what we have. And guess what? When we compare what we spend now under the Global Gateway, say, paradigm shift, it's more than before. So the figure is that if you take the last 3 years, 21 until 23, the average that civil society got for civil level, everything you name it, including the contracts I'd mentioned. Now it is 1.2 billion on average, and In the last MFF, it was slightly less. It was 1.1 billion. So there's more money going to civil society than before. Of course, we all want more, but I think that is a message I wanted to share with you.
Thank you so much. Do you respond to? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Just very quickly on the two other points mentioned. Just with regards to the civil society funding, something that we also mentioned in our report, which was also flagged thanks to the Oxfam network, is that some of the civil society funding is now actually linked to the Global Gateway. Again, I think we can take a whole other day probably to just discuss like the EU finance for civil society, but just to say that this is also something discussed in our report and we raised some of the issues with this. With regard to debt, we actually mentioned that 29 out of 37 countries are from the Global Gateway are implemented in heavily indebted poor countries. So there is genuine risk of that. The last evidence I would like to highlight, again, that we mentioned in our report, is the report of European Court of Auditors, which actually researched the EFSD Plus and has very interesting findings. One of them is that some of the countries, namely Cambodia and Laos, are highlighted there, but there might be more, do not need these guarantees that were allocated by the EU to that purpose. And in fact, they contradict the country's debt rules. So again, I think there's a lot to improve in terms of implementation. With regard to the role of EU delegations is actually a very good question, and maybe also you could elaborate on that, because to us it's still also a black box. We've talked to a couple of people, like from delegations, for example, from Zambia, and it's still not really clear who is responsible for the Global Gateway in these delegations, whether it's someone actually like responsible for the business cooperation or like some kind of political agenda. More we hear that it's always shifted. Oh yeah, that's not my responsibility. Someone else is doing that. So one of our recommendations in the report, I believe, is also to improve the role of the EU delegations to actually have proper civil society dialogue, to play that role. On one hand, we can say, okay, yes, it's, you know, we try to figure it out on the go, like this is still a process, but it's 2024. This is not the time to figure it out anymore. Also to say unions are really not involved. We spoke about civil society actors, but again, stakeholders from civil society are much more than just NGOs, right? Unions mean labor standards. This is so important. And so far we see very, very limited role from EU delegations in doing so, as we hear from our partners. But perhaps Paul or Marta have also more insights on that.
Yeah, well, I do want to go on to the to give more people the opportunity to ask a question. Did you want to, Martha? Yeah. Okay.
No, thank you. I'm just going to go back to that question, and I mentioned it before. Like in Latin America, we haven't had the space to have the conversation about Global Gateway. So basically what I've heard is what read on a website, etc. So just to say that that's the request, that we could have that space, that the Global South, the partners in the Global South also have the space to have the conversation in deep. And I just want to highlight a little quick about this point about, I didn't mention it before, but I wanted to say it now, that we in LAC, and I imagine other regions as well, we cannot afford just to see the EU as a provider of resources or infrastructure. We want to see them as a political ally in certain things, in other things. We think Global Gateway is one, but it could be complemented by other things. So just to mention, COP29 is coming. We have been proposing in Oxfam to have more funding for adaptation strategy regarding climate change. We're also talking about, we're going to have the meeting select EU in Colombia next year. So we want also to partner with the EU to have a conversation around how to promote more like, yeah, yeah, exactly. So maybe we'll see you back there, right? But what I'm trying to mention is that we do have a lot of opportunities, mechanisms, and spaces that we can also think about to complement Global Gateway. And I agree, it's great news that we're going to have more funding, but I want to say that the EU has a geopolitical importance in the world, and we want also to see them as an ally, and we need to work together to figure out the strategies on care work, on fiscal system, to fight inequality, to climate change, to, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Question? And yeah. Oh, so maybe you can do two. Please keep it short.
Hi. Yes, thank you. It's a group of questions. My name is Susana. I'm come from SITSE. It's related to free, prior, and informed consent. How is this conducted with local communities? And what happens actually if local communities refuse the implementation of the project? Is there like, all actors involved in Global Gateway are willing to step back if local communities oppose?
Who was it? Was it direct?
For the Commission for DG Impact.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very interesting panel and for all the discussion permitted. I may want, first of all, I am Jacques Perrault from International Rescue Committee. International Rescue Committee is part of Concord, indeed, because Concord is a network of dozens and dozens of NGOs, European NGOs, including national platforms of NGOs in the member states. I would like to react on one thing that had just been said by Marlene, and thank you very much for sharing the result of this analysis of the support to civil society. You said that this has been increasing. I may have two comments. The first one is, if I understood well the figures, this is not taking into account the inflation. So I'm not sure, I'm not an expert, but I'm not sure this is a real increase. And the second comment is that 1 year ago, Concord, with the implication of several members, including International Rescue Committee and myself, I may say, we published a report called Who Holds the Lion's Share? It was a closer look to what NDK is delivering, is supporting civil society organizations. And the result was roughly the contrary, meaning the share provided to support civil society within the NDK since 2021 was decreasing. So I may have just two questions. The first one, maybe it is, and we made this report on the basis of publicly available sources, of course. So maybe there is an issue of transparency, of access to the information. So my question would be, are you planning to publish the report that is leading to this, the figures you are giving, and of course, including the methodology, because it would be a great help for us to know, and on this basis, to also comment and discuss the figures. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was the last question for now. I'm afraid. I'm really sorry, but we can. I'm sure we can all mingle at the end. Paul, would you just respond to the question about what local communities can do if they can reject a project?
Okay, right, and perhaps it may be the last time I have the mic, so allow me to then now talk about what I think needs to be done next. First of all, let's understand one thing. The Global Gateway projects are not the traditional domains of civil society. These are complex, very highly technical projects. And expecting the NGOs to assess them, evaluate them, and review is not just being unfair to the NGOs, but it is setting them up to fail. Just look at the projects. We have attempted, we even brought technical experts to try. But there's an energy project that is complex in nature, has got various, even just the digitization that I'm talking about. If you look at what the details are, those are not the domain of civil society. And so therefore, there are two fundamental issues around that. One is an advisory board is formed, and then we are told there is no money for you to do your review, the analysis, because this is under PFD, and so therefore the expectation is that you'll do it with your resources. That's the first thing. I hope that has changed. I'll raise it tomorrow. And then number two is you are being given projects that are too complex for which even with the resources that we have as civil society, we can put in money for that kind of analysis. You'd require thousands and thousands of euros to be able to analyze an energy Kipevu 2 project is somewhere in Kenya. And so I am just wondering, what is the rationale of asking civil society to monitor, to review if one, there are no resources available for it, unless things have changed. In fact, I was told that there was a floating, I think there was a proposal or whatever that was floated. But what was interesting is that appears to be completely independent of what is being done. The second thing is, I want us to really appreciate the work that this team has done. And I really want to plead with you to read the report, the 144 pages. I only had the draft, you know. I only got it this morning. I have been having the draft ever since. So please read the 144 pages because you will find out two things. One is most of the evidence are anecdotes. There's very few evidence that can actually be pinned down. There's a reason for that. It's extremely difficult to get information on the global gateway. Extremely difficult. In fact, one of the reasons why I am so excited about here, and I've been here 3 times, is when you see something is so secretive, then there is something cooking that you need to follow up. You should pray for that. I have personally been pleading. I've been here 3 times. I was here in March. I was here in June. I was here on Friday. And part of what I've been pleading ever is let's make this information public. Let's make the information public. There's the Global Gateway platform, whatever, portal, but that portal is only for Team Europe. The rest of us cannot access it. And I have attempted to reach out to some of the members of the Team Europe, and they're telling me that is internal to us. We cannot give you access to it. And even if we give you access to it, it doesn't have a lot of information. So as I'm waiting for the reports tomorrow, on Thursday, as we have been told, I am also hoping that part of the agreement we will have on this table today is that we'll commit to be open, we'll commit to be transparent, and allow me to now propose 3 things. One is, let's get the financial flow right. As it is right now, the biggest challenge we have the global gateway, we don't know how much is grant, we don't know how much of that is loans, we don't know where the loans are coming from, we don't know how they were negotiated. We have done our own estimation, and again, estimation because we couldn't find details because of the secrecy. By the time the global gateway projects are over, the continent of Africa will have $627 billion in loans. But that's not what we are being taught. What we are being told is how nice the infrastructure projects will be, but we are not being told how they will be financed, where the money is going. Now, what is unfortunate is that this 627 billion is going to be left for us as a loan, but the money may not even end up on the continent. The money is actually ending up with multinationals here. So there's hardly any money that is going to be left, but we are going to be left with 627 billion that we will then have to pay. If you want to know how we arrived at this 627 billion, just look at how the global gateway is going to be financed. The primary financing is coming from the DFIs and is coming from EIB. Those 2 institutions don't give grants, they give loans. And so if you just track where that flow is going to be, then you actually see where this is going. So I am asking for more openness. That is what the EU always tells us that they believe in. They tell us about openness, they tell us about transparency. Please, let's go ahead and do it. Secondly is, please don't sign contracts with our politicians and then call it a signing of a contract with our governments. They were shipped here. My own vice president signed a contract that we fought back in Kenya to stop him from signing. We fought day and night to stop him from signing, but he came and signed here. And then
The information we have is we have signed a contract with the government of Kenya. No, you signed it with our politicians. The politicians are not the government. And then you talk to us about engaging our citizens and the civil society. Fair enough, except there is one problem. Your delegation is very selective on who they engage. Very selective. They engage those who speak their language. They engage those who do things the way they want. And the language I've had here, there's a tinge of it that I hear it on the continent. If you protest too much, we will defund you. 3 weeks ago, before coming here, I sat with one organization that I will not name. And we were trying to see how to bring our agenda here. And the organization told me, remember, we are funded by the EU. There are some things we can't say because that would be the end of our funding. Now, while
not scared, they do it and they're funded by us.
while on this side, there appears to be openness. And sometimes when I come here, the impression I get is that the EU is very open. But that's not the information I get from those who are interacting with your delegation on the other side. And I am hoping that part of what we will agree with is the proposal that she has raised. Let's have this discussion or in the global south. Let's take this discussion on the African continent after here in sincere openness.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, but I have to cut it short. Just ask you like
2
15
messages.
seconds to
15
respond to the
seconds.
gentleman.
Of Jacques. Okay, yes. Unfortunately, I do not have a supercomputer where I push the button and all these figures come out. Nobody has. Nobody can say so many global gateway projects, X, and all the details. As we don't have it, I cannot put it on a website. It's as simple as that. My people, it took them half a year to get just the figures on civil society. And Concord, we had several kind of meetings, also with Tanya Cox, where we have explained our methodology and have explained what the methodology is. And again, I cannot count every single cent. So we have to do with OECD DAC codes. Jacques, you know what it means. It is an approximation and there is no supercomputer, first thing. The second thing, to Paul, please. I have spent my whole summer sitting here and thinking how to square the circle and get you what you really want. And I hope that at least you feel that I'm really engaged and I'm on your side. Because I had exactly this situation. How can civil society on these technical things, digital environment can say, and my kind of answer was, it cannot be that every one of you does it. And maybe it should not. That's why tomorrow you will see local civil society from Kazakhstan talking about serum, critical raw materials, who have in Kazakhstan for many years watched and monitored mining. And we have also in our Global Gateway group, civil society specialized in digital. We have the Friends of the Earth, environment, because we have understood that you need expert. And the last point I make, I hope that you fully agree, and I would like to go there, that we pay civil society so that you talk to us and advise us, because there I can see a clash of interest. I cannot see a clash of interest or that you talk what I want to hear. Neither of you did today. So we talk to you and we give you the funding and you do your work. And I'm happy that you do, because it makes my work more exciting. And I think at the end of the day, when I will go out of this job, maybe in 2 years' time, that we have moved something. Over.
Thank you so much to all the panelists. I'm sure we'll all follow the platform meeting tomorrow because we've been hyping it up for 2 hours straight. I just wanted to give Frank the opportunity for some closing remarks. Again, thanks you all for the lively debate. It was super fun to be here, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow, or at least to the stories I'm going to hear.
Yes, I was thinking to like start with thanking everybody, but thanking has been done like 12 or 15 times, and I think for very good reasons. So I'm going to be very short. I'm really proud of the amazing work that has been put into making this project become true. I'm also really proud of everybody who's coming together here. And most of all, I'm really happy that today we really strike a nerve. And I think it's a very good thing. And I think it doesn't always happen. And so I think like today, this report, it's something that to build on. There's plenty of cases, there's plenty of analysis that has been talked about so much this morning, where really there's a potential to do work on this, to really look more in detail. So this is, for me, it's an invitation towards the CSO community, towards others who are here, like, please be with us. We did this part of the work, but now we have to build on this. We will continue. Next week, we will be in the EIB to talk about this. We will be in the European Parliament to present this report, and we will be in the Italian Parliament to build this report. But we have to build on this. We have to build new work on this. And to the decision maker, I'm really happy that you're here and that you gave we gave us a strong discussion. And I think it's a very good thing. I think it's also important to see that often the Commission thinks that the problem is communication. Communication is an important thing, but where we are today, action speaks a lot louder than words. And if you're honest about the intentions that you express, then we will see in the future how much we will be consulted to really be part of the decision-making process. And this is what will be the difference. And we really hope that you are with us on this. And with this, I would like to end, because I think that we sucked enough oxygen out of the room and we all want a breather. So thank you very much.